Welcome to another episode of the PWYFA Play Where You Feed Our podcast. I'm Cameron Dobbs, and this is my boyfriend, Eli.
What's up, guys?
Eli, are you excited to be on the pod today?
I'm so excited. I feel like we're going to be laughing the entire time, just because.
Yes, we will be. Also, if you're watching right now and currently judging me for having my Christmas tree up in January, it's technically December 7th when we record this. I also don't like that I have the tree sticking out of my head, but it's okay. We'll make do. So yeah, Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Crazy. Well, we are super excited to do the podcast. If this is your first time joining, this podcast, kind of in a nutshell, it's all about playing where your feet are. And play where your feet are means to do your best and be your best no matter what, no matter where. So in any position you're in, knowing that you have purpose and to take advantage and not just take up space. It's good, right, babe?
Yeah, that's great.
Alrighty. Well, we are so excited to do this today. I want to say, before we get into everything, because it's going to be maybe even a 2-part episode, to be determined as we are recording. We'll figure that out, how long we talk for. But super excited, and we'll go into kind of more of our vision behind the podcast once we really get started here. So we'll get into that in just a second, but before we get fully started, just want to say this podcast is so much more than a podcast. And so we have books. We have book 2 coming out in like a month. We have book number 1, of course, has been out. We have play dates, we have retreats, we have camps, clinics, merchandise. I'm repping today. He's not, but it's okay. I forgive him. And so much more. So y'all make sure to go to @PlayWhereYouFeedAre on Instagram or playwhereyoufeedare.com to find all things podcast, book, merch, and so much more. We would love for you guys to stay connected. But without further ado, baby, let's get into it.
Let's get it.
Enjoy another episode of season 4 with my boyfriend, Eli Castillo. This is the PWYFA Play Where Your Feet Are podcast, and I'm your host, Cameron Dobbs. Well, y'all, we are so excited to be on season 4 of the pod now. This is kind of crazy. We are on season 4. I cannot believe it myself. The fact that we've had so many episodes and so many great episodes and so many great guests. And now we got another good guest with us today, Eli, joining us on the pod. And I kind of want to talk about why we're deciding to do this podcast and why now. Because for me, I think in years past, and even in podcasts past, we did a Godly Dating and Relationships Q&A with Brooks Cluxton last summer. And even on that podcast, I feel like I was very much not until he's my fiance, all this stuff. So kind of why am I choosing to have my boyfriend rather than, because we're not engaged yet. Everyone ask the question. We're not engaged yet. This is my purity ring. Why is he coming on now versus later? And the reasoning behind that, at least in my own mind, is the fact that I feel like, we're not perfect, but we do a lot of things right. And I think that we're doing this right. And we're honoring God, and we're working really, really hard to do the best we can.
Yeah.
And do so in a godly manner and have really godly people around us pouring into us.
Correct.
People know us at church. We're doing things, we've kept things in the beginning maybe sacred, but they weren't secret. We were never doing anything in secret. We always had a lot of important people pouring into us the whole time. Mm-hmm. Accountability, we'll go through kind of why we think we're doing this right in our further explanations and lessons. But I also think it's rare that people talk about what they're going through as they're going through it.
Yeah.
And so I want to do that. We are in the season of dating right now. We are in the season of moving forward right now. And rather than, hey, let's get engaged and then talk about it, I feel like it's going to be a lot more relatable to you who are going through this season right now to hear us walk side by side with you and do it in a way that honors God.
That's
and
good.
So I think we're just excited to speak about it today.
Yeah, really excited.
Yeah?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, let's do it. Awesome. So, per usual, I have my notes over here, so ignore me if I'm scrolling or looking to the side. But we are super excited to do this. So kind of the rundown of what today will look like. And I mentioned as well, this might end up being a 2-part episode. So maybe this will be part 1, part 2, we'll find out. But the first portion will be our story. And that we think might end up being an episode in and of itself. Because it's long.
Definitely, for sure.
Because it's quite the story. A lot. Very much so. So we're going to start off with our story, and then from there we're going to go into actually questions from you guys that you submitted a while back when we hard launched. I posted a little IG question box and got some questions, so we're going to go through those as well. And then after those, we're going to hit some little lessons that we've learned throughout the process. that if we haven't touched on already, we'll go through those as well. And so again, if you're listening to this in part 1, part 2, it'll probably be story first, and then part 2 will be questions and lessons. But either way, it's gonna be great.
Oh yeah. Let's
You
get
ready?
to it. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, first things first, this is technically answering one of your questions because our good friend Sasha commented in our question box and said, tell us the whole story in depth, spare no detail. The people want to know. All right, babe. Where should we start? Let's start, actually. Okay, let's start on how you got to Miami.
Okay.
Because you're not from here.
I'm not from here.
Nor am I.
Yeah. So basically how I got here, I am from Texas. Shout out 956. I am from a place called McAllen, Texas, which is near the border of Mexico. It kind of all started with, I was doing ministry school down there at a church called the Family Church. I was doing a Bible school there for about 2 years. And honestly, if I wouldn't have been in that Bible school, shout out Nikia Garcia, who is my LTC director at the time. And yeah, she was awesome. And yeah, one of the main reasons why I'm even in Miami was because of ministry. And that leads to my story about being here. I moved over to Miami the year 2021. It was August. But I came to visit Miami prior in COVID, actually. November 2020, I was actually talking about this with June and Hanju. Shout out to my guys who did the VU internship with me during 2020 when obviously the world was kind of shut down. And yeah, so I did the VU internship in the summer. I knew right away that I was impacted by the community at VU, even through Zoom, which was amazing. And so I did that. And then I was like, I need to visit Miami. I was like, this is crazy. I'm not even saying that. And yeah, so I come shoot down November 2020. It was the first Vision Sunday back, first Sunday ever back at VU in person. And yeah, instantly fell in love with the community. They had an impact on my life that I literally was like, I don't know where else I'm going to be able to get this. And yeah, sure enough, I moved my whole life that following year over here. Went into that 2021. I did VU college for about 2 years. And then during, pretty sure it was 22, one year into that, I met Cameron, Cam Bam, in May of 22. And we were actually at a small group, and at VU we call them VU Crews. So yeah, it was May 22, the year 22. And then she came with a friend for the first time.
Can I say my side of this before you go into...
Yes, you can say a little bit. Let me finish a little bit, and then you can, yeah.
Okay.
So I was going to, I'll say why I went to the crew, and then you can kind of like give me more backstory.
Cool.
So basically, the whole reason why I was going to this VU crew was because one of my friends, his name's Edwin, one of my best friends, he was helping to co-lead, and one of my friends, Mike Noriega, actually helps lead that crew. So I had already been to that crew various times, and it was actually in another location, but I think this was probably going to be, it was either the first or second time they were ever going to do it at David Kennedy Park. And yeah, so we go, whatever, I don't think anything about it. And lo and behold, I meet a tall blonde, and we hit it off right away. Chemistry, we're talking trash, having fun. Nothing like, out of this world, like, oh my God, I just like,
sparks flew.
Love at first sight type thing. But I knew, obviously, she stood out, and it was just one of those things where it was just, funny. We had a couple of mutual friends, and yeah, I think it was just funny how we met, talked trash. We, again, hit it off, again, just as friends, nothing like out of this world. But we quickly and surely had a quick connection for sure. You can share your story.
And my side of the story. So it's funny that I went there in the first place because this season of my life, it was, as you said, spring 2022. And spring 2022 for me was really particular because I was living in Atlanta and working in Miami. And so it was just already like a weird deal type of thing. And the fact that I was in Miami at this time was just, everything had to orchestrate perfectly.
Yeah.
And so I'm coming back down for hosting baseball. This was towards the end of the season. And I would always come and crash with just like friends, families. I mean, at that point, I'd been in Miami for about 4.5 years. And so I knew a ton of people that I could stay with. And my friend Anna, who was a new friend of mine, I had just met her through social media.
Shout out Anna.
Shout out Anna.
OG.
Yes, met her through social media, and we hit it off instantly. And then, like, the next trip I was in Miami, I was like, what if I just stay with you and we do a sleepover? Like, that would be fun. And so we did. And I remember flying in, because I think I flew in that trip.
Yeah.
And I remember being exhausted, but she was like, there's this thing. It's like a VU crew. It's a volleyball VU crew. Like, you played volleyball. This makes sense. We should go. And we were both kind of though, like, I don't know. Like, it was her first time going. She was a little hesitant. I was a little hesitant. But we were like, fine, let's go. Let's be good people and let's go. And so we ended up going, and it's hilarious looking back because, yes, I met you that night, but I also met Edwin and Mike Noriega and just, like, all these guys that kind of created my foundation of VU people that ended up being, like, my best friends and just people that were really pivotal in my life since then. And even that weekend, I remember I hosted, and there were, like, 30 people from the VU volleyball crew that showed up to the game. Like, yes, to enjoy baseball, but also to cheer me on. And I was like, this community is so nice and just like, this is crazy. Like, it was so awesome that I didn't have to try hard at all to get people to come and support, and like, y'all willingly wanted to come out and support. Yeah. And so that was super fun. But yes, so met night one and instantly hit it off. I won't deny that. Instantly hit it off. We had great chemistry, started trash talking on the volleyball court, had a lot of fun. And that night we went and got Salt and Straw as well. And then that was also the night we went to the dock. Is that confirmed? Or we're not sure?
I think we're not sure. I think we'll probably confirm with a couple other people, our friends who look at the pod. They'll probably be like, they're going to be like, yeah, we actually know when it happened. Probably, I think maybe it was like shortly after or something. I think it was after.
I don't think it was the first. But Salt and Straw became pivotal.
Yeah, Salt and Straw for sure. That was definitely our thing.
It's an ice cream shop, if you don't know. It's a chain. It's all over, but it's not so good everywhere. So we would go to Salt and Straw.
Salt and Straw sponsor us.
And then from that point on, though, we basically kind of became like inseparable in our friend group. Like, me and Eli never had solo time until 2 years later. Like, legit solo time.
Not legit,
but we became inseparable. So it was like Anna, Edwin, me, and Eli that whole summer just always hanging out together. And whether it was just us four and we'd go get dinners, we'd have movie nights, we'd go to Roundup, we'd have fun, like whatever it might be. It was either all four of us or in bigger groups. We'd go to VU on Sunday nights because I hosted in the mornings with baseball and I couldn't go to church on Sundays. So that was also the whole reason why I ended up at VU during this season was because I wanted to be in a church building. Metro, my old church, doesn't have night services, but VU does. And so in order to be in a church building, I would go to VU with friends. And that just became like really awesome because we all got to spend a ton of time together. I got to really grow these pivotal friendships in my life. And then with our story, though, back to our story more specifically, that was also a season where I was talking to another guy. And so, yes, though we hit it off, we had chemistry, all the things, I was not interested because my mind was elsewhere. Would you like to say anything?
Yes, I was also freshly out of a relationship as well. Yeah. So I was, again, not in the mindset of like wanting a girlfriend, or again, this is why like I say like, yeah, we had great chemistry and friendship, but it was never like an instant thought of like, ooh, like, you know, again, that whole like love at first sight. But it was also like, you stood out, obviously. But again, fresh out of a relationship, my mind wasn't on like trying to, again, hop onto the next thing or find the next girl or anything like that. I was like, man, I need to lock in. I need to focus and, you know, just again, not interested in anything, trying to find my way and finishing up the program I was doing at VU College, obviously. And just working, again, putting my head down, grinding. So, again, my focus wasn't on anything else besides what I was doing at the time. And, again, you coming in out of nowhere was funny. But also, again, I was like, I can't point exactly why you kind of stood out. I mean, we know why now, right? But at the time, again, it wasn't one of those things where I was trying to pursue it or trying to like nick at it. It was just like, man, this girl's just a really good friend. Again, trying to find out the type of person Cam was actually really funny because I always tell everybody this. I was like, there's no way Cam is that like either nice or genuine or like it almost feels like fake, right? Again, not like to talk trash about her. It was just like I don't know if this girl is actually like who she says she is. Like, again, I just met her, so like I don't know like her character.
What's the catch?
I was like, what's going on here? Again, trying to find out at a friendship level the type of person she was. So again, our relationship growing as friends and everything throughout the years solidified that, man, this girl's set apart from the rest. And gentlemen, pay attention to those. Really do. Not she's different from the rest. If she stands out, and man, I don't know what else to tell you besides that. I feel like, for me, you stood out a ton, and you're something that I always tell you, like, there was a specific standard, and you were that standard for me. And I think that's what kind of kept me, as we say, kept coming back, right? I was like, there's something about her. And again, I would just kind of have that idea in my head before I actually started pursuing you. So like, why is she different? Why is she set apart?
I want to go into that because for any guys that are listening or girls that are listening, either way. So like whether it's a girl thinking, okay, how did she stand out? Or a guy thinking, what quality should I look for that stand out? Can you go deeper into like pinpointing some of those at least?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So I think it's like when other people and how people talk about you, right? And I don't even have to, again, it's not like you're going or I'm going to tell people, hey, like, make sure you're talking good about me, because I'm with my friends. Like, it's never that. It's because that's how, your character shine. Like, other people will come up to me, hey, you hang out with Cameron? She's awesome. She's great. Like, I can tell, like, again, they say that the saying is, like, I can tell you who are with by the friends you hang out with type thing. And that's kind of how we were, right? Making all of our friends better, and I think that's what you are. Like, that's what I was like, man, like, there's something about Cam. And even though I couldn't really specifically point it out, other people would tell me, like, man, she's great. She does this, she does that, A, B, and C. And how you were, I guess, also involved, right? I think this was also one of the first times I was involved with Operation Christmas Child. And being able to see you from literally now to all the way back then, I was like, oh, it's not just a one-time thing for you. You're all in. And it's the consistency, too. Like, I'm like, okay, I've seen the consistency from when I met you to now. So that's also another thing that's attractive of like, okay, this is telling me a lot about the person that you are, and her story. That's another thing. Your testimony is really powerful, and I think that's very impactful. And I think right off the bat, a lot of people talk about, oh, my testimony is not that powerful, my testimony this, my testimony that, but it's also like, no, everyone has their own story, and you have your own story, mine's separate than yours, but I think that also says a lot about people's character and, how they come back from things, and I think that's another thing that stood out for me, like, wow, she's looking at, adversity in the eye with how she went through with you getting medically retired, and just your story about that. Again, those are just bonus things, but I think that also says a lot about the type of person that you are, so look out for the type of person that they are, their testimony, maybe not, trying to find out, everything about that person in one go, but, there's people that talk about those people, and hey, if they talk about them in a high regard, take note of it, take everything with a grain of salt, obviously, because, you don't know, everyone's opinion about certain people, but again, nitpicking a little bit of things, taking notes of, that so-and-so talks about Cameron this way, or so-and-so talks about them this way. So again, taking note of that, put it in the back of your head and being able to see, how they talk about that person is obviously very important. So.
Yeah. Reputation.
Yeah.
Which, not to say that, well, there's a famous line of like, reputation is the only thing you have in your life or whatever, but it's so not to say that like, to care about what people say completely, but reputation does matter, and it shows a lot about
just take note of it.
And I think we'll talk about that later in like, I feel like one of our lessons, even because we got to know each other, which I feel like we need to get back on topic a little bit, but we got to know each other really as friends before we started dating. And so I think in that time, like, there was no agenda which we'll talk a little bit about that, because there was a little bit of agenda, but there was no agenda. So like, we very much were authentic and genuine. And so we were able to see each other in spaces without thinking, oh, they're trying to impress me. Like, no, this was genuinely Eli. This was genuinely Cam. And then also to have like Danny, one of my best friends, be surrounded by you in church more. And I'd be like, hey, Danny, like, is this the truth? Like, how does he act when I'm not around? And like, have sources speak into that. So yeah, that definitely does matter, just how they act overall, reputation, things like that. But with all that said, feelings were caught pretty early on.
Yeah.
And,
more on my side. More on my
yes.
side. That
And
counts.
and I will say it was a very interesting dynamic as well for me. And we haven't talked about this off air with Danny. She was over this morning before we recorded, and I was definitely balancing. I had a lot of fun with him. Yes, chemistry was great. All the things, we were hanging out a lot. But I was talking to this other guy, and
It just wasn't enough, guys. It wasn't enough.
Eli can share what he has said about this other man. He's more than welcome to talk about that, because he made that very, very vocal, he and his friends, during this time. Because again, I was also honest with him.
Yeah,
I was very
of course,
straight up,
you were.
because I didn't want to lead him on. And so I wanted to be very honest where I was at with the other guy.
And just to be very honest about that, I think that's where sometimes some girls are afraid to going. Like, they're afraid of kind of like being honest of where they're at. And I think, again, you did a really good job there of letting me know where you're at, because then I knew kind of, I mean, in a way, not to necessarily back off completely, but I understood where she was and the boundaries she had, and that kind of put, be able to guard your heart in a sense, because it's like, I want to guard my heart, protect Eli, and also protect, the person that I'm talking to at the time. And then I think that's very important. I think that we're in the era of like ghosting. We're in the era of like, oh, I don't want to say my feelings, which I think that was the way you did it was the way it should be done, I believe, in my opinion. And I think that girls should take note when they're doing that, because again, it's like, I want to talk to this, which again, there's not necessarily anything wrong with that. But I think when if you're all in with a specific person and you're trying to talk to that person, I think being able to, if you knew I kind of liked you. So it's like being able to tell me, hey, actually, I kind of like this person. So kind of A, B, and C there. And I think that was the important thing for me, because even though, I wasn't the biggest fan of that feeling or that emotion, it was also a feeling like, hey, you know what? I can respect that. I can understand where you come from. And now that also, again, told me where your heart is at, the type of person you are. And I'm like, man, that's just so much more respect. Again, at the time, it was like, well, dang, right? That's unfortunate. But it's like, well, at least they told me, at least it was like a little confrontational there, but I'll take it. So. And
for me, like, I had been on the other end to where I was in relationships before where I was like in your position, basically. So like where the guy was talking to multiple girls and I had no idea, and then however much into then I got slapped in the face and be like, oh, there's another girl and I'm going with her, like, sorry, bye. And I was like, oh, that would have been nice to know, like, at some point,
Yeah.
And so I wanted, like, I was like stressed. I was so concerned about like how you were feeling and how the other guy was feeling. And I just wanted to make sure like no boundaries were crossed either way, that I was honest with you, like exactly where I was at with him. And granted, I wasn't dating either of you. Like, neither of us were official with anyone.
Yeah.
But there was some intention behind the relationship there. And so I just want to be, like you said, honest and guard your heart and also guard mine in the same process. And so with that, though, there were some feelings thrown here and there, and lots of words said from your friends, and well, Eli's here now, and all the things, and whatever it might be. And I feel like there's, I don't know if you want to say more about that.
Yeah, I mean, and just to add on really quick, we are not like relationship gurus.
No,
like, we are by far like, we're learning as we go. I think this is the whole thing about this episode as to why we're doing it. Like, literally, we're figuring it out. But this is why we're recording it. This is why we're kind of walking through it. So we don't want to give a big generalization of, oh, yeah, this is how you do it, and this is how da-da-da-da-da. It's like, well, no, we're figuring it out as we go. We're making a couple mistakes here and there, and I think that's how we're, I think everyone, like you said, like, never really sees that process. If they do, it's in close proximity when they're walking with those people. But if we're able to share a little bit of that, of our story with some people, I think it can come a long way, and some people can take note of it. If it helps you, if it impacts one person, that's great. But I think that's also why we're recording that this episode, to be able to have that impact with, that one person or maybe a few other people. But yes, guys, we're not relationship gurus. We're definitely figuring it out every single day as we go.
So I think moving on, we can kind of go into now. So we met in May 2022, stayed friends that whole year. Well, important, I moved back in July 2022. And from there, I started going back to Metro, like going back to kind of my previous life before I was before I left Miami and came back.
Yeah.
So I wasn't going to VU as much anymore. I wasn't as around as often, but we still hung out a little bit.
Yeah.
And so maybe go into like January that 2023 year. Like what pivotal thing happened to them?
Yeah, so basically I confessed my feelings for Cameron.
Yes.
I told her that
Because up until that point, things had been said maybe by other people. A lot of people would always ask like, what's going on with you and Eli? And like all this stuff. And I'd always be like, nothing, we're just friends, we're just friends, like whatever.
Yeah, basically
I'm talking to someone else.
all
like,
of our friends were hinting at it to her.
Yeah.
Then kind of a couple of her friends were kind of like, well, you know, they were basically kind of telling me, not that it wasn't working out with that other person, but they were kind of like having their shared opinion of like, honestly, like, we don't know why don't you go for it? Like, we know you, we love you, we don't know the other person. And they don't, obviously never had anything bad to say, but they were just like, well, we know you, we don't know him. And it's like, you know, favor ain't fair. Like I used to like to say, so I don't know. So I guess I kind of took that as motivation in a sense, and sharing that, I was like, you know what? I was like, well, I really don't have anything to lose, and Cameron's always been somebody who, again, she's been a standard. So I was like, maybe I should talk to her.
Dang it, dude.
Maybe I should start talking to her, or at least let her know that I had feelings for her. And I remember I was with my buddy Jose, and I think we had just had a conversation, maybe in person or something like that. And
Us or you and Jose?
I was hanging out with you.
Yes, you were.
And I left.
Well, this was when I got my 5th concussion.
Exactly.
Yes.
That's exactly
we
what
always
it
forget
was.
about
We
this.
always forget about that
Yeah.
part.
So I had gotten my 5th concussion at South Beach, and Jose was with me.
Yeah.
And he drove me home.
Yeah.
And
Texted
I remember,
me. And then you called me.
You were working at Nautical because it was the opening day or whatever, opening weekend. And my car was there.
Yeah.
Because I went there first in the morning. We all hung out.
And then I
left with Jose in Jose's car. And so he texted you, and
then I was like, "There's no way you're driving."
Yeah,
home.
like y'all wouldn't let me drive, and I was, here are my keys, take them.
Yeah.
And so then we met you at Nautical, picked you guys up, because I think originally we were supposed to hang that night anyway. Like we were already supposed to do something at night with everyone. And so now I was like pivoting a little to be a little more chill.
Yeah.
But we went to Nautical. You picked up my car. You drove my car back to the house. I drove with Jose. And then we all just like sat on the couch.
Yeah.
And I remember we were a little close that night. I remember.
Well, no, I think you drove in the car with me. Like I
No, I didn't.
You didn't at all?
No, I wasn't with you in the car. I wasn't with you in the car.
I remember.
No,
I
you
still
might
stayed. Have.
No, I still stayed with Jose.
I don't know, guys. Anyways, we always do this.
We'll probably do this a lot more on this
We
podcast.
definitely will. No, it was my way. No, just kidding. But yeah, you were definitely in the car with me. I think I remember vividly because you were like, I think you like your parents were. I remember something of like the sort of like where you
This is all incorrect information, guys.
Incorrect information.
Yeah. What were you gonna say about my parents?
No, that you had like, I think you were like either talking to you or something. I was in that vicinity.
I didn't tell my parents anything until 3 weeks later when it was after the fact. And they were like, why didn't you tell us? And I was like, because I knew you'd stress out.
Maybe. I don't know.
So anyway,
you were talking
I
to
rode
somebody.
with Jose.
You were talking to
I rode with Jose.
Something of that sort.
And then we went back and we were hanging out at my house.
Okay.
Continue.
Cool. Anyways. So, yes, we get home. So we hung out, and then I guess I got the courage or the motivation to kind of, say that I liked you. And I remember I wrote some things down on a note. I stepped over at Jose's, and then he was kind of like hyping me up. And he was like, dude, you should just tell her. And I was like, concussion, I don't know. And then I was like, well, whatever, I don't have anything to lose. So let you know how I felt over a phone call, actually.
Yeah, you called me. Y'all left. We stayed up. We like watched movies or talked or hung. Like it was just like very chill hang.
Yeah.
And then I remember you called me at like 1 a.m. or something, which was not long after you had left.
Yeah.
But yeah, you called me and I
was just
answered,
right back. Let's go down the hatch.
And you read it. You read what you had.
Yeah, I kind of read
out.
most of what I had written down, which I was like, I don't know if that helps me. Guys, do not take note of this. I don't know if this is good or bad. Maybe it isn't. Maybe everyone's kind of like, dude, you don't have confidence. It's like, I did, but it's also like...
Wisdom.
It was
you
like...
say what you want to say.
Yeah, but it's also like situational. I think it's different with specific people.
Yeah.
So it's like, don't.
We all know I'm a big notes girl.
Yeah, she's a big notes girl.
We'll
So
get
that's
to
also
that.
one of the main reasons why I was always like, well, I need to have my thoughts like kind of in line. It's not even because I didn't know what I would say. I feel like I know what I wanted to say, but then I was like, my goodness, well.
Well, either way, you said it.
Yes.
And then I remember I responded, and I was like, okay. And I don't remember exactly what I said, but I remember I said whatever.
Yeah.
Like, I responded to it. And then I had said something like, because you had your whole, like, call to action was like, can we talk further?
Yeah.
It wasn't like an answer there. It was like, can we talk further about this? If you were interested, in talking further, could we talk further? And so I was like, yeah, for sure. Like, let's talk further. And I was like, maybe let's not talk about this when I'm concussed and it's 1 a.m. and exhausted.
Yeah,
and so we were like, okay, cool. Like, let's set up a time, a day to talk, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah. And then I'm sure we, like, maybe that following Sunday or something, I remember I went to your house, and then we had a conversation on the couch.
Yeah.
Right?
Sometime within the next week or so.
Yeah, sometime like that. I think I went to go, you kind of like give me a few, I don't know, moments or days or something. And I mentioned, I guess, went more into depth as to why I liked you, why you sit apart. And then you kind of gave me the same go around of like, you know, talking to somebody, but also like, that it wasn't completely shut, I guess.
Per usual, I was brutally honest, and we know how you took it, so we'll get to that too. But like, I was very honest in where I was at with the previously mentioned guy, and how he was not as in the picture, but he was still in the picture. But at the same time,
going on dates and stuff.
Yeah, I was going on dates. Like, I was not tied down to anyone. And granted, I don't want this to sound like I was wild and out. Like, it was just going on like occasional coffee dates with some good guys.
Yeah.
And
not drinking coffee. That's nice.
Yes, always drinking my chai.
Nice, babe.
Always drinking my chai, never coffee. But anyway, so like, my point in saying that to him was like, and I told you too, I was like, if you ask me out, I will say yes.
Yeah.
I have no guarantee on where it'll go, because Eli's also not my type originally. Like, so that was also like.
Type, guys.
So that was he was just different. Like, he was not what I expected, like, in so many different ways. And we'll get to that too. I don't know why that was even crazier than it sounds. But no, like, I was just, whatever. I would say yes if you asked me out, but I had no idea. I had no idea where I was at with you. I had no idea where I was at with the other guys either. Like, you know, and I was just open. I was very open. So I'm like, if you ask me out, I'll go out on a date, of course. Like, and we can see what happens.
Yeah, and I think that comes from maybe a little bit of a lack of maturity on my part, because my first, I guess, response to hearing most of it, I think hearing it was kind of like, well, I'm not like a second option at all. I'm definitely not a last one. Like, you know what I'm saying? So I think that's kind of how I took it in a sense. And again, I was like, well, I'm not just another date. I told her, I know what I want. That's you. So I didn't have any other options. Not because, you know, I didn't want to go find anything or whatever, but I just really didn't want to find anybody else. And I was like, I know what I want, and it's you. Yeah. So it was pretty crystal clear for me. So I think maybe the indecisiveness of how it seemed or how you were kind of like going about it, I was like, well, she doesn't know what she wants.
Yeah, you're like, Cam needs to go figure it out.
She needs to figure it out, because it's like, I want somebody who wants me the way I want them, right? Which, you know, to some extent was very true. But again, I was kind of going based a little bit off my assumptions and kind of assuming how you were feeling. And that shows a little bit of lack of maturity on my part of like assuming certain things and not going directly to the source and just asking them, you know, straight up. I think for me it was just assuming and not necessarily going and obviously asking you personally.
And granted, that was also mostly internal.
Yeah.
Because how you responded externally was, I remember you asked me, you're like, all right, well, like, what are you doing tonight? Or like, what are you doing this weekend? Or whatever it was. And I was like, oh, I have the book launch like thing with Pliables. And we had already planned. I was like, you're coming, right? So you were coming. And I remember when you had said all this too, you were like, I want to continue hanging out with you. And you were like, even if it's in groups, like, I just want to be more intentional about like seeing you more and being with you more. And I was like, cool, like, sounds great. And so I remember we were doing something, we were going to do Pliables, and then like crazy thing happened that day, and that was when there was like the shooting at Dadeland.
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
Like,
there
just,
was like a whole thing.
Chaos.
Our building
like,
shut down. It was like kind of crazy.
And so that
still
delayed,
made it out though.
delayed him from getting there. And so I was almost like a little bummed for that, because again, it was like coming off of like, okay, Eli's now stepping up, like he's gonna pursue you, like this and that and the other. Again, this is all internal, like this is where my mind is at, to be clear. Not where his mind is at, this is where my mind was at.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, all right, now it's time for, like, after all this time, like there's always been the rumors, there's always been this and that and the other, like the flirt, like all that kind of stuff, but like now it's legit, he's gonna pursue. And then that was delayed, and so I was like let down internally, but again, like uncontrollable circumstance, like you could not plan that at all. Yeah. And then that night, everyone was supposed to come over, we were gonna do campfire, all the things. And then you guys ended up like being hungry, wanting something more. I think y'all went and got pizza or something. Ended up not coming over. And I remember I was like uber disappointed and like upset. Like, cause I was like, really dude, like you finally get your opportunity. Like after all this time, you finally start making moves and then you don't show up. And so I was like, oh my goodness. I'm like, I'm over it already. And so that was, again, maybe a little immaturity on my end. He mentioned some of his as well. And so from that moment forward, there was, again, we also never said any of this. And so it wasn't
just
like a thing that happened. Like
I guess it was like a specific like tension, like not bad tension, but like I guess, again, we never voiced it. We never said much. Like
moving on.
Like without having to say anything.
And
again, I think that speaks to a little bit of the communication of having to talk to that person and, again, making assumptions, right? Like, kind of both making, I mean, more on my part, just making an assumption on my part, and I was just like, there was never like a, on either side, there was never a follow-up or like texting, because we just weren't like, you know, I think we wanted a lot of, we were fine, but I think we wanted more of like the natural, you know, divine intervention, I guess you can call it, to happen, and obviously we didn't get it, which at the end of the day, obviously, ended up working out for us, and the timing of it all, and God is just obviously so kind, and which I think that's an important part too, because we'll talk about God's timing a lot in this, because it's kind of crazy. But even to that point, it's like you could tell by listening to this, and we've said it too, like there were some areas of immaturity in both of us, where it's like, and I say it all the time, I'm like, if we would have tried back then, we would have failed. Like I don't think it would have ended well at all. And so I think that God was so like, they got a hint of it, but this needs to separate. Like this needs to go opposite directions. Like, and it happened so gracefully. It happened beautifully. Like I said, there was no harm, no foul, no anger, no animosity. Like there was no big, like nothing happened at all. It was very actually natural how we came apart briefly, and then we just went apart once again and went out of each other's lives. And again, God then continued to do an incredible work in each of our lives individually that year. That was so extremely pivotal in our lives, and then happened to also be in our relationship as a whole. So should we now go into what that year? We'll go into, me and Cam joke about going into a year sabbatical, which is what we just mentioned.
This I feel like is where it gets interesting. I feel like this is where like the really big God work starts coming into play, and then our individual lives just start like pivoting in different ways. And then I also feel like this is like the hidden stuff that people don't really know, because a lot of people knew us from the time before of like seeing the back and forth and the Cam and Eli and the confusion or whatever, and like, what is that about? And then no one saw the separate time. When this ended up being like the most pivotal, I feel like, of our relationship. So we always joke that we went on a sabbatical. As we mentioned, we kind of go through this like separation that was very natural. Nothing happened. And it was natural in a lot of different ways, because God started changing our circles. So we weren't hanging out as often together anymore, because I went back to Metro, as mentioned. I wasn't hanging around VU people as much. I wasn't going to that volleyball crew anymore, so I wasn't around those people on Tuesday nights. And just very naturally, we just weren't in the same room together anymore for a year. So I think we saw each other in January for that conversation. We saw each other in February for my birthday, dinner. And then your birthday, we took you out in March. And then it was like nothing at all until like November. Like didn't even see each other at all. And then we saw each other, which we'll get to that, but we saw each other a couple of times towards the end of the year. So literally like 5 times in 1 year after going inseparable for like a season. And so it was like kind of a sharp contrast, but very natural. And so through this time, on my end, I'll say my end, and you can speak to what God was kind of doing in your life and what your life was looking at. In my end, I slowly but surely, previously mentioned guy is now out of the picture. Ended terribly. So that was just, I feel like a big wake-up call for me in a sense of just what I want, what I don't want, and almost the point to where you're like, well, my plans are clearly not working out. I think it's about time that I surrender that to God. What does that look like? And really just pursuing a godly relationship. And so I start meeting more and more with my mentor, and Joy Beverly, shout out if she listens. We're meeting with them next Sunday. But she tells me, she's like, Cam, you need to have more guy friends, and you need to go on more dates with guys. And granted, this is coming from a very wise woman, Christian woman, deep in her faith, all the things. So this is like with discernment. This is not just like, you need to go on dates, like, and get yourself out there. Like, no, she was generally like, you need to go on more dates, like, learn truly what you like, what you don't like, and move forward. And so I was like, okay, fine. I was like, I did not want to do this at all. And I also hate being vulnerable and putting myself out there. When it comes to guys, everything else in life, I'm chilling. When it comes to guys, nah, not at all. I will tell any girl anything. I wrote a whole book, like all the things, but when it comes to guys and relationships, I am like a brick wall. No. So I was like, dang it, Joy, I know you're right, so fine, we will do that. So then I start going on dates with guys that are good guys. Granted, I was not just going on dates with anyone, but basically like any good Christian man, to my perspective, that would ask me out, I would say yes. Even if they weren't my type, even if they were this or that and the other, like, I didn't care. It was if they were a good guy at the heart, then I was like, okay, cool, we will try it out and give them a chance. And so then I just started going on like lots of dates. So earlier in the year, like there was the previously mentioned guy, and then there were like 2 other guys then, and then in this span, she told me this in like August. So in the span of like August to December, I went on probably 7 or 8 dates in those amount of time. And for me, I've never had a boyfriend, so, and rarely do guys ask me out. So that was like boom, 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 lots of guys, like all the way back to back to back. Granted, again, only first dates with each one of these. We weren't even talking really outside of the dates at all either. So it was kind of just like meet for coffee. We meet for coffee. We have good coffee, chai. Nothing happens. We move forward, you know. And so I went through all this, and most of them were just like, solid time, but nothing crazy. And I was like, all right, cool, whatever, like moving on. And then one of them was pretty pivotal in the fact that I just remember sitting there, and this one actually was like actually really deep for me. And I don't know if any girls will relate to this, but this guy was kind of very much into me, and Eli knows all these stories. That's why I'm smiling at him. But he was very much into me, and he was very much declaring that on the date and kind of talking about how, like, you're this and that and the other, and, like, this is everything I've wanted and all this stuff. And I'm kind of sitting there, quite honestly, kind of being like, this is not what I imagined for myself. And I remember going home that night, and I'm not a crier, but I remember going home that night and just being, like, so overwhelmed and upset and disappointed and sad. And I remember just thinking, like, will I only ever be like a prize to the guy, and I'm never going to get what I want? And it was a really tough pivot, because I was like, some of the things that are quote unquote on my list or whatever are very shallow things. So whether that's looks or height or this or that and the other, it's like, I know, God, that those don't ultimately matter, but I also look at the close friends and family members in my life, and they've gotten everything they've wished for and a good godly relationship, you know? And so I'm like, where do you draw this line of like putting an X on your expectations and just like full surrender versus like still having hope and like praying and like believing in this stuff? And so I was just like deflated, and I felt really defeated and sad, and was just like, well, like I'm just always going to please the guy, and like I will never get what I want, and that's just going to be that, and I just have to accept it, I guess. And so I was just like down in the dumps about that, like felt really bad. Like I had sunk on it myself that night, and then I told my roommate Kay, and I like cried to Kay about it. And then like a month later I was talking to my mom, and I cried to my mom about it, and it was just like really weighing down on me. And again, it was this battle of what is surrender and what is still having faith. Like, I didn't know the balance between that. And so throughout this season, I go on a couple more dates throughout that year. And I just end up that year being like, I'm just so over this. Like, it was taking a toll on me. It was exhausting. I don't have time for this. Can be so much more productive doing other things, business, work, life, hanging out with my girls. Like, I saw no purpose at all in pursuing any of it. And so I got to this point where I was like, you know what, God, and I've shared this on the podcast before, but I was like, you know what, I actually am so content if I'm never a wife and I'm never a mom, because I am not willing to make the sacrifice of what I'm sacrificing now for what I'm getting in return, because it's not worth it to me. I'm like, it's not worth it at all. I would rather be single and fired up about what I'm doing and passionate about the people I'm around and pouring into girls. And hey, I'm really good at being single. So maybe for the rest of my life, I'm the single token girl, and I get to pour into other singles and pour into other women and talk about how you don't need a relationship to advance your ministry, to do this, to that, to live, period. Like, obviously you look at the Bible, Jesus was single. Paul spoke a lot about singleness, was single, like all this stuff. And you're like, you don't need that. And so I was like, well, maybe that's the calling on my life. Like, maybe that's me. And I was okay with that. And I was fired up about it. And I won't go too in depth with that, because we actually talked a lot about that on the podcast coming into this year of our 2023 debrief and wrap up going into 2024 goals. That's our passion debrief as well. So I'll link that below. That's a very pivotal podcast, and we'll also get to why. But if you haven't listened to that one, that's extremely pivotal in our relationship. So I would also listen to that one at this point and then continue with this story. Because you'll hear in that story too, that 2023 year for me was my year of prepare and rest. Rest makes sense, checks out. Prepare was quite honestly to prepare to be a wife and a mom. And so I'm thinking that whole entire year kind of that, like, I'm going to end the year engaged. Like, I'm going to end the year getting ready to be a wife and then eventually getting ready to be a mom. And then all of a sudden, God's funny, and I actually end my year so content, fine with never being a wife nor a mom. And so that was just kind of the work that God was doing internally in my life. Eli, what was the work God was doing in your life?
Yeah, so for me, complete opposite. I didn't go on any dates. Again, knowing what I wanted was really easy for me. Again, Cam was a standard for me, and I didn't necessarily go on comparisons or like anything about like looks or height or anything like that. For me, it was just like, again, the way she stuck out in her faith and the type of person she was around her friends, very family oriented as well. You always talked about your family. So again, just kind of, I didn't always have like a list, but I knew what I wanted right off the bat. Like it didn't take a whole like sheet of things for me to understand that this is the girl that I want to be with. Again, friendship, a long friendship like that between the both of us literally made it really easy for me. So again, I'm going through this whole year, I probably went on one date at least. One date, literally. Yeah. And that was, again, we'll tie into pivotal to us. But yeah, literally went on 0 dates. Probably one of the best years of my life being single. Like, again, meeting a ton of people, great new job, meeting new
roommates.
Yeah, just all the things like roommates, friendships. Going on a couple of trips, and again, just taking life to the fullest. If I'm being completely honest, like no worries, wasn't tied down to anything. Yeah. So I was also finding, I guess you could say my calling, or why I was still staying in Miami. And I think the thing that I came to conclusion was that it didn't matter what I was doing, I could still glorify God. Even though I was in a, I guess, quote-unquote secular job, I was still being able to glorify God through that. I could still be at church and serve every day. And again, just to give a little more context, I was a VU college student for about 2 years. So again, I'm in ministry full-time, basically, and just every Sunday, just giving, all of my day to Sundays, and then obviously doing school during the week. But then now it's kind of switched up on me where it's like, now I get to choose. There's not an obligation because I was tied down to VU college. Now it's like, okay, Eli, what are you going to do? Is this still something you're called to do? but I believe that I was still called to be here in Miami. And even though it looked a little bit differently, now it's more responsibility for other things, being able to ultimately provide for myself, not through in the college way, college Eli, but through as a literal like single
Adult,
man in Miami.
yeah.
So that was very pivotal for my growth and growing in those things. And I guess quote unquote the same way, preparing as well for what the next season was going to come into.
Which I think looking back, it's like, oh, that actually was my year of preparing.
Yeah,
like, it's
it really,
not what I imagined, but it was exactly God preparing me.
Yeah, it really was. Again, it wasn't one of those things, mine wasn't as, I guess, my words specifically, but again, when I go back to it, I was like, man, I was really preparing and sowing seed into some of these things that I needed to get better at, and again, I didn't know what was going to come this next year, but fast forwarding to the end of that year, I remember there was 2 moments. And this is just a little more context. Shout out Giovanni. So I had never been to a Miami football game, guys. And I was, again, we could have a whole spiel about this. And I wasn't the biggest Miami football fan or anything like that. I had been to a couple baseball games and gig 'em, but I love football. Played football in Texas high school football. There's nothing better like it. So sorry, Florida guys. But yeah, I went to go see a football game. I remember, I think I asked you, I texted you, I was like, hey, I've never been to a game and I kind of want to go, like, whatever. It was super random, honestly. Yeah. And you were like, yeah, sure. And I was like trying to get a couple guys to go. But shout out Giovanni, who's the only guy that came with me. And a little more context to that, Giovanni actually went to Metro with you. Yeah. So it's not like you didn't really know him, but you guys, it wasn't one of those things where it's like, oh, like close proximity. It was just like, oh, I know of that person.
Yeah. We weren't in the same circle.
Yeah. So yeah, lo and behold, that was probably the second to last time we saw each other that year, or like second to last time, I guess, in a way. Went to the football game. Giovanni still kept a couple pictures. Actually, fun fact, maybe we can show them, or I don't know.
We can post them.
Yeah, so we had a couple pictures that Giovanni took, and he was like, dude, like your chemistry was like off the charts, man.
Supposedly that's when he called it.
Yeah, he called it, apparently. Maybe Giovanni did call it. He was like, man, I could like see you and da-da-da-da-da, and like trying to get my hopes up. And I was like, dude, everyone's been saying this. She's just a friend, and I'm sure she felt the exact same way, just a friend, which is what she did. And then the following time, we played pickleball. Shout out Nicole. Nicole and Duo played pickleball.
Yep.
Couldn't beat us. Still can't beat us. They're like, what, 0-5 against us? 0-7. Still can't beat us. Sorry, guys. We're so good at pickleball. I'm just kidding. We're not that good.
We're solid.
We're like 2-5s, dude, at most. But yeah, we went to go play pickleball, and then we definitely did not see each other. I was actually going to mention the one day that I went on. I think one of the biggest reasons why I also went on it, shout out to my roommate Trey. He was kind of encouraging, as in like, hey man, like you probably like, there's no like bad, like there's nothing bad that can come out of you going on a date. The only thing that can come out of is you learning something of either wanting to go on a second date with this person, or again, maybe that's not what you want at all. And so you're still going to learn. And I was like, you know what? You're not wrong. Maybe this solidifies something that I really want to pursue, or maybe it's just like, nah, I don't want to do this. So go on the date, everything was great, but I think the ending of it was just, again, it was one of those things that, not necessarily that she wasn't Cameron Dobbs, but it was one of those things of like, man, like, it still comes back to Cam, right, in a sense, right? I wasn't necessarily saying that or thinking that, but there was certain qualities and certain things that I was like, you know what? I don't think I can see myself with that person. That's okay. That's kind of one of the main reasons why I went on that date. And being personable and being intentional. And I'm a very intentional person. So again, it was intentional about it, all the things, and it just didn't move anywhere. I wasn't like, feeling any butterflies or anything. I was just like, okay, it's not what I want, and that's fine. And
kind of like what my dates were as well.
Yeah, basically
like, solid, but
summed up into one, guys. What can I say?
What did you say?
Like summed up into one, but you had like 8 dates. I'm just a joke.
Don't make me sound bad.
No, you're not bad. I always kind of joke a little bit about you with that I didn't need to do all these dates, but it's a bad joke. Anyways, so I did that, and then I think it was shortly after, probably the end of December or mid-December, is when we had like maybe a couple hangouts, maybe one hangout.
Well, I'd like to talk about church, when we went to church together.
Oh, yes. I'll mention this. I'll mention this.
Can I talk about it?
No, I'm just kidding. I'm You can mention it. But wait, you can't mention it. But
Eli now runs this podcast, apparently. I'll exit the premises.
okay, so yes, that one time at church, but it was like super random, right? Like we had to hang out.
We were doing Operation Christmas Child, and you were helping out, and you helped out in the morning with a group of people. Once again, no solo time ever. And I don't know if we were planning before, but at some point it came into conversation because I clearly was missing church that morning to do OCC. And so I think you were like, I'm going to City tonight. Like, do you want to come with me? And I was like, yeah, sure, I'm down. And so we were going to go to church. And then I remember, like, after the fact, you, like, texted me, like, oh, I'll come pick you up. And I was like, oh, what did I do? What does this mean?
Overthinking as always. She's an overthinker, guys, by the way.
Because I didn't, once again, like, I wasn't interested in him. And, like, we hadn't seen each other in forever either. And so I was like, I don't know if he thinks this is like running it back. Like,
running it back is crazy.
Is this like a date at church? Like,
no, I was not thinking that.
But I just didn't. I didn't.
Girls,
Once
guys, this is what the girls think about. They're like overthinking. Oh my god, he's like probably thinking about me all the time. And it's like the dude's like not thinking about that.
Meanwhile, it's not Cam, so no.
Oh my gosh. Well, I wasn't intentionally thinking those thoughts, but it would lead back to it.
Anyway, and so when he asked me this, I said yes, but I was very cautious again of like, I just don't want to lead him on. I want to be careful about what I say, what I do, whatever. And at this time, though, I will say, I had heard through the grapevine about, like, very indirectly, though, it was funny, like, no one ever told me. It was like, I somehow knew this. Literally don't even remember how, but I had heard somehow about, like, the date. But I didn't know about the date. I thought, like, maybe they were talking or maybe they were, like, going out a lot. I had no idea, but I knew that there was, like, potentially another girl in his life. And so, not to a crazy extent, because then I guess that would be weird if you were, like, picking me up solo for church. Yeah. Anyway, but to that, I had that in my mind thinking, oh, he's not into me. So, like, I'm chilling. Like, I'm okay if I go with him solo to church. Like, we're fine. It'll just be two friends catching up. Like, we're good. And so I remember driving there, and you can go backwards and talk about if you want to have, like, your perspective too. But I remember driving there again. I was, like, a little nervous, a little guarded, like, I don't know. There's the wash. There's my Samsung just making an appearance.
The dryer.
It's so long too. Hey.
Oh, it's still going. I thought it was done after that. Okay, that's long. That's not good. We're gonna edit that part.
Now it's done. Now we're gonna keep it in. Anyway, before we were so rudely interrupted by the washing machine, we were driving, and I again was like very cautious of like what I said, what I was behaving, whatever, and just like again not wanting to lead him on. And then our friend Kat starts driving on the interstate on like 826 or something on Palmetto next to us in the same car. And she like rolls out the window and we're like, oh my goodness. And so immediately I was like, thank God. Well, I think because we were like, are you going to church? And she's like, yeah, I'm going to church. And we're like, we'll see you there. Okay. So we drive in together and park next to each other. And I'm like, whew, I can walk in with a girl. Like, I'm not walking in. Because again, like, I feel like we didn't touch on this that much, but beforehand, it was literally everyone always being like, are you and Eli together? Are you and Eli together? Are you and Eli together? And I'm like, no, we're not together. We're just friends. And so, like, I didn't want, once again, like, and I felt for me, too, like, VU was your space. It wasn't mine. And so whenever I walked in, that accelerated and, like, extra emphasized, like, this is Eli's space. Cam's only coming here because of Eli. And it's like, guys, I also love the Lord. Thanks. Appreciate it. I would appreciate being in a church building. It's actually not coming here for a guy. Didn't know if you knew that about me or not. But I've actually never had a boyfriend, so this really does not matter to me whatsoever.
Hilarious.
And so, yes, I had my nerves for good reason, at least in my opinion, because of what had happened in the past. So when Kat drove up, I was like, thank God I can walk in with Kat. But again, I still had it in the back of my mind, like, he is interested maybe in someone else. So, like, I'm off the radar. I'm not in his mind. So we go in, and it's funny because, like, pretty immediately, like, I see a ton of people I know. He obviously knows everyone too. And we kind of, like, start going our separate ways. We sit, I think, maybe in the same row because I think you, like, pointed the row for us. Like, you led us to the row. But then I sat next to Diana and
Yeah,
like
I
Kat
didn't
and
really
like
sit
all
first.
those girls. And then I honestly don't even know where you sat. So I was like, okay, he didn't sit with me. Like, he's not even in the vicinity of me. And so I'm like, all right, we're good. We're chilling. Like, he's not interested whatsoever.
Yeah.
And so then we did church, whatever, blah, blah, and then drove home, and it was totally fine. So I don't know if you want to add perspective to that.
Yeah, just add perspective. I mean, again, I wasn't trying to, I don't know, trying to like cause a scene or like be like, oh yeah, like I'm doing this to like set up myself perfectly. Like there was no master plan behind it.
There was no agenda behind it.
But again, there was intentionality because I was like, okay, like she's a good friend of mine. I haven't hung out.
Was there any purpose behind?
I mean, yes and no. Not necessarily like to like, I don't know.
Like, was that part of, were you trying at all to potentially pursue me, or was it really, really genuine and like innocent?
Yeah, for the most part, definitely very genuine and innocent. Obviously, there's always like thought like, oh my gosh, like, you know, she looks great, whatever. But, you know, but again, it never overtook the fact that of like, oh, like she's my friend and I was going to do you a favor and I would pick you up. And I think it actually ended up working out.
You actually did me a huge favor.
Yeah, ended up working out to pick you up.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, they actually ended up working out, whatever. Yeah. And again, I was, when we were driving too, I guess I was kind of thinking of like a little bit of what she mentioned of like, oh, people are going to think whatever. And obviously I didn't mind it. I was like, whatever, you know, people want to think, they can think what they think, you know, whatever, cool. But she was the one that was always worried about that. I was just like, babe, just let it happen, Cameron, you know. But
anyway.
But yeah, Kat was that was really cool. Divine intervention, Kat. Thanks.
It really was.
Yeah, Kat came through. And then I was, okay, sorry, it's not all about you, it's about Jesus. So yeah, we went through and I was already thinking in my head, I was like, okay, I'm going to be smart about this. I'm not going to be like, again, making her feel uncomfortable. I don't want people to come up to her and make me do this whole thing. So I was like, be smart about this. Let the girls sit with the girls. Go sit with my guys over here at the end. It was all good. She was happy. I was happy. There was no like, you know, there was intentionality for sure of not sitting with you for sure.
Yeah.
Like again.
Intentionality, but like on the reverse side.
Yeah, on the reverse side of like not wanting people to think that because again, I guess you could say I'm a true gentleman. Wanted her to feel good at church and, you know, have her time with the Lord. But yeah, of course, I was like, you know what? Let her be with the girls, do that thing. I'm going to be with my guys, whatever. That happened. Again, we went out, back home, had a good time, whatever. So that kind of happened. I'm pretty sure we had like maybe one more hangout together with everyone before you left to Passion, correct?
Yes, we had a Christmas party at my house. I remember you came in.
I made a quick 5-second appearance, guys.
Literally, he
Shout
came
out
in,
Brand.
hugged my roommate and took a photo with my roommate. And then,
smart guys.
And like didn't acknowledge me, whatever, and left. So
like,
once again, this is adding more fuel to the fire in the sense of me believing he's not at all interested in me.
Yeah,
and
it's not all about you, Cameron.
Thank you. And I was glad. I was like, for once.
But it was also, again, I didn't want to do the whole thing because before I actually was, again, kind of flirty with you, kind of like, to a sense, it was kind of like, oh, it kind of is a little bit all about Cameron and
yeah, so
a little bit. It was never like
change and like
it was change. I was just like, okay, I don't want her to think that I'm all about her and everything about her because like we know how that went. So again, trying to like the whole of like I'm here for this person, say hi, whatever. I did acknowledge you. I acknowledged you.
You probably said hi, but like it was literally just like. Hi, Merry Christmas, and then moving on.
Hey, good job, bro. Good job. You did it.
Yeah, and it's funny too because there was also right after church. I was not literally after church, but like after that church time, I was at Jose's house. Me, Kay, Jose, and Paran. Yeah. And we were in the hot tub, and I remember it came up. I think Jose had asked something like, why not you and Eli, or like what was the story? Because like I feel like he didn't really know the story of it. So I kind of like went through it and like said why not and all this stuff and that's I think kind of when I knew a little more about the other girl, other date. And so I was like, no. And it's funny. I remember telling them about when we went to church together solo, and Pran was like, you shouldn't have done that. You shouldn't have done that. That was a bad idea.
After he was like, dude, he's like, just forget about it. And I was like, I mean, I was like, clearly, I was like, well, dude, I'm not even trying to do anything. But I was also like, I guess to a certain extent, again, like, being intentional about
Yeah.
not making you feel that way. But again, it's always kind of,
Yeah.
again, it
Can't help it.
kind of like, oh, can't help it. Cam, looks amazing. And it was always just there,
Yeah.
lingering. It was never like an overpowering thought of like, oh, I'm doing this because of Cam. Like,
Yeah.
I want to do this because of Cam. Like, it was never just like that. But, but it was never like because of that.
Yeah.
It was always just like, subtle,
Yeah.
just there. But yeah, so one more time, that happened. Brian was like, dude, don't do it. I was just like, I mean, you're probably right. Probably shouldn't. Like, as in like pursue.
Yeah.
Like, it was just like a thought.
Give her up.
And then I think Trey even was like, I remember Regatta.
Oh yeah,
Regatta,
I always
too.
forget about
I
this for
always
some
forget about that,
reason.
too.
Well, that actually ended up being, I think, pivotal because this was November, so this was before the Christmas party.
So basically, it's back to back, like Trey, like asking you, like, why not him? And you're like, because it's not him. And then Brian and Jose
Yeah.
kind of like, why not him? And you're like, because it's not him, guys. And
Yeah.
then you're like, okay, cool.
Yeah. Well, and just to go deeper into that story, because we were all hanging out. My bestie Colby was in town,
Bird.
and we love Colby. Colby Bentley now, which is wild.
Connor's the man.
Connor is the man. This night proved it that he was the man.
He's
But we
him,
won't go
he's
into
him,
that.
he's him,
We
he's
won't
him.
go into that.
He's him.
But anyway, so we were all in town.
him.
My friend Haley, my teammate Haley was in town too. We were all hanging out. He and Trey, where was Bran there?
Brant was there.
Okay,
Trey's
you,
there.
Bran, Trey, people ended up all coming, Kay, and we were just hanging out. And then I was talking to Trey individually without Eli, and Trey was like, "So what's happening here or whatever? Like why not Eli? Why are we not doing this and stuff?" And I was just like, "Yeah, he's just
not him.
not my type, and I just
Yeah.
not interested
He's not
really."
that guy. He's not that guy.
No, he's definitely not that guy, and all the things. And so I was just like, no, I'm sorry, like he's a great guy or whatever, good friend, but
Wow.
no. Friend zoned
Nice,
forever.
Nice.
And so, yeah, that was basically that story. So Trey asked me, then Jose asked me, and it was just like, no.
Timeline's pitiful. Yeah.
Yeah, and so then...
Hi friends, this is Editing Cam popping in to say we have realized we didn't even clarify why this night was so impactful and so valuable. So after the night ended, we took Colby and her now husband back to their hotel, dropped them off. And Eli, Paran, Kay, and I went to go get pizza after. So we kept hanging out longer. And this is important because on the ride in the car, Paran was just kind of asking me a lot of questions. Now, Paran has known me since 2017, and he ends up kind of asking some questions on the relationship side of things because he had witnessed some of my relational past and had kind of been there for some of it in a sense. And so he was just like asking all these questions, which kind of led to the previously mentioned guy and most recent guy. There goes ESPN. And that led to me kind of telling that story in short. And at the end, he was like, well, is it all finished? Like, is it over? And I was like, oh, yeah. Like, that's been done for months. That guy's out of the picture, all the things. And that was the first time that Eli had heard directly from me that guy was out of the picture. And I remember I'm driving saying this. The boys are in the back. Kay's next to me. And I remember looking in the rearview mirror and almost being like, how's Eli going to react to this? Because this is the first time he knows this information from me directly. Sorry, that's ESPN again. But I don't feel like doing this again, so we're going to just keep going. So that's the main reason, I think, in my opinion, why that night was so pivotal. Yes, Trey had also asked me, and that was like another, like, Jose, Trey, everyone's asking me why not you and Eli, like, still, after almost 2 years. But it was also pivotal because I kind of told Eli, like, yeah, I'm back on the market and the guy's out of the picture, and do what you may with that. But it wasn't me like trying to tell Eli. It just happened like that. And we got pizza and hung. So just a little touch point, back to the story.
Went into 2024, right?
You go into 24, you go to Passion.
I go to Passion. Once again, if you don't know that story, extremely pivotal.
Extremely pivotal.
And I would go listen to that episode because that has more in depth. But long
Yeah.
story short, I was given this ring, very much got more like confirmation over the whole, ended my year being like, oh, I'm actually so content being single. And now I get this ring from a stranger at Passion. And it's like, oh, this is the ring I was going for all along. It wasn't an engagement ring. It was this ring, my purity ring. And also just like how I got, like, as cliche as it sounds and is maybe, it's like God's the number one man in your life. And if God's the only man in my life the rest of my life, that's the only thing that matters. And like, I don't need another guy. And so I was like so fired up just being single and like I saw the previously mentioned guy at this place, and it was very much even more confirmation of like, wow, God, thank you, God, that that's out of the picture. Like, so much just like literally insane. And I'll maybe eventually share more on that story down the road, because that's actually crazy how that happened. But it was just very much just like, I exited passion being like, single Cameron Dobbs is so excited to be single and fired up and just like so much vision on my life for what's God's going to do in community, in church. I had made the decision to switch from Metro to VU, and was just really fired up about my year. Like, I knew I had a job switch coming. I had so many new things coming in the year, and I was really excited to fully dive into those with like no distraction and just full commitment to God and all this stuff. So then I come back from Passion. We record said podcast, and we recorded that on a Friday night. Are you ready to go into this?
Ready.
Okay.
Hey, Play We Repeat our fam, editing Cam coming back in again to actually pause and end and leave you on a cliffhanger. So at this point in the story, you pretty much know the backstory, all the juicy details from the past. Now we're getting into like current, future. What kind of sparked this time around and what stuck to keep it sparked. And so this will be where the current story begins in the next episode. But if you're bummed to be stopping here, no worries, because the next episode is actually already launched. It's launched with this episode. I just didn't want to have like super, super long podcast episodes and try to keep them to like an hour. And so the next Part 2 version of this is already out. You can immediately go and continue listening should you want to finish listening on this sitting that you're in right now. And then after this, there's a Part 3 actually. That's pretty much the lessons we've learned through the process so far. By no means, we've already said it, by no means are we pros, but we do have a couple lessons that we've learned that we'd like to share, and some things that kind of keep us accountable and pure, and different ways that kind of help our relationship. So we have that episode coming last. It's not as long, or didn't feel as long as recording the whole story. So that's coming after this. But y'all, thank you so much for watching another episode of the PWYFA podcast in season 4. So much fun to be kicking it off with Eli and having him join the podcast, the ministry, the business, and all that fun stuff in a variety of different ways, in a new different way, I guess. He's always kind of been in the background in a sense, helping out behind the scenes, and now is a little more in the forefront. So it's been fun having him on. But make sure you check out PlayWeRepeatOur.com and at PlayWeRepeatOur on Instagram to keep up with all things. We got book number 2 coming out. We have merchandise, camps, clinics, retreats, and so much more. Of course, podcast episodes like this. And we also posted some content that was mentioned in the episode. So photos that we might have mentioned, memories, moments. We've made sure to put those on social too, that you can check those out, y'all. Such a fun season of Play Where Your Feet Are, though. Thank you for being a part of season 4. The best is yet to come. We're pumped for this year. It's going to be so much fun. So till next time, till you go ahead and hop on over and binge watch the rest of the story, or binge listen, till you hop on over to part 2. Be blessed and play where your feet are. Love you guys.